She was deemed unsinkable, but in her maiden voyage, the unthinkable occurred. Welcome to Watch Mojo's Top 5 Facts. In this installment, we're counting down the top 5 facts about the Titanic. Number 5. Newspapers got the story wrong. They say that bad news travels fast, but not so much in 1912, as a number of newspapers on both sides of the Atlantic misreported the disaster. Perhaps most famously, Britain's Daily Mail carried a front page stating that the Titanic had sunk last night, but that there were no lives lost. While the Baltimore Evening Sun got things wrong in America, as it claimed all Titanic passengers are safe. Generally, the American press benefited from a 6-hour time difference and began to make sense of the disaster, but with only scattered wireless messages to work from, details were still sketchy. The New York American reported that 1,500 to 1,800 people were dead, while the New York Times tentatively went with, quote, probably 1,250 people perished. The London Evening News got it right when they printed arguably the most iconic headline, however, Titanic disaster, great loss of life. Number 4. The ship had a whole lot of facilities for first-class passengers.
Good evening, sir.
Titanic was truly a pioneer in terms of onboard comfort and convenience. The Ritz Hotel in London loosely inspired the ship's interior, and its facilities were many and wide-ranging, especially for first-class passengers. There was an onboard gym, squash court and swimming pool, as well as Turkish baths, a steam room, and a massage center. Such was the size of the ship, the Titanic even had its own onboard newspaper, the Atlantic Daily Bulletin, which was printed on site and carried news updates received by the wireless operators. And what wealthy dowager would travel without her precious lapdog? The ship had its own kennel on Deck F, and every day the ship's stewards would exercise the animals on, I swear, the poop deck.
That's typical. First-class dogs come down here to take a shite.
Number 3. Several notable figures were supposed to be on the Titanic.
She designs naughty lingerie, among her many talents.
Many famous and notable figures came this close to boarding the ship, but for whatever reason, didn't, and were luckily spared in the disaster. Milton Hershey of Hershey's Chocolate paid a $300 deposit for a first-class passage, but unexpected business had him leave Europe 3 days earlier. Wealthy sportsman Alfred Vanderbilt luckily changed his mind about sailing, only to be killed in the Lusitania 3 years later when it was struck by a German U-boat torpedo. Radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi narrowly avoided Titanic as well due to rescheduled business, and his luck continued as he also sailed on the Lusitania but on the voyage before its disaster. Legendary financier J.P. Morgan was also supposed to sail and even had a personal suite on board, but fortunately he chose to extend his stay in France instead. Contrastingly, John Jacob Astor IV is believed to be the wealthiest victim of the disaster, worth around $2 billion in today's money. Legend claims that after the Titanic struck an iceberg, he quipped to the waiter, "I asked for ice, but this is ridiculous." Number 2. There was supposed to be a lifeboat drill the morning before it sunk.
For the time being, I shall require only women and children.
A lack of lifeboats on Titanic and inefficient use of those that were available is usually blamed for what most analysts agree was an avoidable high loss of life. While it's important to remember that the ship did meet legal requirements at the time, there were just 20 lifeboats on the vessel, 16 wooden and 4 collapsible. Even so, if utilized correctly, they could have carried 1,178 people to safety. However, the first boat to leave, which had a capacity of 65 people, went with just 28, a trend which continued for the other 19.
Why are the boats being launched half full? Not now, Mr. Andrews. There, look. 20 or so in a boat built for 65, and I saw one boat with only 12.
A little over 30% of those on board survived, but over 50% could have been rescued.
Fill these boats, Mr. Lightoller, for God's sake, man!
Number 1. A woman lied about being a lost survivor. Lorraine Allison was the only child in Titanic's first to second class to perish, and was just 2 years old when the ship went down. The Allison family, the women and children of which might have been accepted onto the lifeboats, reportedly remained on the stricken ship as they were unable to locate Lorraine's brother, Trevor. The tragic individual story was brought back into the public eye in 1940, when Helen Lorraine Kramer claimed to be Lorraine Allison. According to Kramer, her parents had handed her to a man named Hyde just as the lifeboats were leaving. Kramer died in 1992, with the Allison family still refusing to accept her story. The situation was only truly cleared up in 2013, however, when mitochondrial DNA testing on female line descendants of Kramer and the Allisons found that they were not related. So what do you think is the most incredible part of this epic disaster?
Survivors' accounts tell us that
Some of the passengers were picking up the ice and playing with it. Some even put it in their drinks.
For more unsinkable top 10s and completely avoidable top 5s, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.
Keep looking! Is there anyone alive?